Welcome to the Co-Parenting Conversations podcast, brought to you by the Center for Divorce Education. With renowned psychologist Dr. Donald Gordon, we will delve into the complex world of co-parenting during and after divorce and separation. Join us as we explore some of the emotional, legal, and practical aspects of parental breakups, helping you navigate this transformative journey with wisdom and guidance. Whether you're currently going through a divorce, contemplating separation, or supporting a loved one in their journey, the Center for Divorce Education is here to empower you with knowledge and offer you a roadmap towards a brighter future. The information presented in this podcast is intended for educational purposes only. The presentation of this material is not intended to constitute mental health therapy or to diagnose mental health disorders. The presentation of this material is not intended to constitute legal advice. Participants are encouraged to discuss specific legal questions with a licensed attorney of their choice.
Welcome back to the Co-Parenting Conversations podcast with the Center for Divorce Education. I'm your host, Mike Eubanks, Operations Manager here at CDE. Today we're joined by Dr. Don Gordon, Executive Director at CDE, and Brook Olsen, founder of the High Conflict Diversion Program and a nationally recognized expert in the field of high conflict divorce. Brook has spent decades helping parents reduce conflict, protect their children, and find a way forward, often in situations where communication has completely broken down. In today's episode, we'll explore what he's learned over the years, what really works when emotions run high, and how parents can shift the dynamic even if only one parent is willing to do the work. So, Dr. Don, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Brook, welcome. It's good to see you again. And I'm glad that we're both working in the same field with very similar approaches. So we'll get into that today. You've been working with these kinds of families and the parents for many, many years. What first drew you into this line of work?
Well, like so many people that are in this, as you and I have discussed, I came to this through my own process. I was in an extremely high conflict divorce almost 25 years ago now, and didn't have direction. I had some good people around me. I was in the process of really dipping into my own personal stuff in terms of, the psychological components of conflict and trying to uncouple myself from it. And as a process, started to really look at the personalities that were involved, what the courts did or didn't do in the process, and worked to extricate myself from the process. And as a result, I ended up interning with somebody that was really deep into this, but didn't have some of the components that I thought were really important, such as authoritative type parenting and attachment theory and somatic expression and some of these other things that help people be able to see a little bit more deeply about what the effects are for both themselves and their children, and to give them tools, skill sets to begin to disengage from the process.
Over the decades, how have you seen the nature of conflict between co-parents change, if at all?
Well, I don't know that I've seen it change so much, Don, other than I've seen people get more educated about it. I've seen, at least in some jurisdictions, as you know, a more enlightened approach to understanding the high conflict personalities, kind of what's underneath them. I've seen some evolution in that, although not as much as I'd like to. I know that you work a lot with the AFCC and your program's trying to bring those concepts more forward. So I think there's been some progress there, which enable parents to have at least some notion of what to expect or how to navigate it. But I think the basic dynamics of human nature and how we unconsciously engage in conflict, whether it's high conflict in divorce and custody cases or the workplace or interpersonal relationships, those things are in us. So trying to find the skill sets that help people through that, I think, have been part of the evolution.
I'm happy to hear you talk about skill sets. A lot of people in this field think that it's sufficient simply to give parents information. about the effects of divorce on kids and what they can do and the risks and all that, and just simply giving them information. And I don't believe in the literature supports that that's very effective if you're not doing anything about improving their skills.
No, there has to be a place where the parents that are involved in these conflicts are really self-reflective. They're able to look at their own complicity in it and understanding how they got there. So these skill sets are exploring the internal landscape, trying to hack the neurobiological sequences that we all have intrinsic in our nervous systems, and having the reflective ability to make different choices from that. In other words, getting skill sets to unhook from that neurobiological process, the amygdala being hijacked, and coming more cognitive, but coming more cognitive with information that allows a person to parse out what is really needed to do, and having the templates, if you will, to execute those.
That's a really interesting way to put it, is the templates to execute those. Can you give us an overview of your high conflict diversion program, and what do you think it makes it effective?
Well, we've got several pieces in it, and what I try to do in the program is really the the live and the online programs that I have are parsed into 3 or 4 different sections. And the sections are, first of all, understand what you're in. Understand that the courts do things or don't do things in particular ways. Understand that these personalities that come in for the fight are pretty entrenched in their behaviors, and that the change is not going to happen outside of yourself. There's that internal correction of belief systems that needs to be examined, and how the other person's belief systems have come to exist, and not being challenging to their belief systems, but understanding what they are so they become more navigable rather than being in conflict with them. Some understanding of it, understanding of the basic principles of attachment styles. So understanding how attachment styles come together in a pretty natural way, and how they evolve into conflict, or by understanding how they evolve to not have them evolve into conflict if they haven't already. Understanding the divorce process and how people, this is really a grief process that they've got to go through and get to the other side. So creating patience and understanding in that is probably one of the key early components that I have. The other is, again, understanding parenting, co-parenting, parallel parenting, and the different models that are available in conflict to reduce the conflict. So notions of disengagement is something that I lean heavily on. And disengagement isn't gray rocking. Disengagement is an internal process of awareness, acceptance, approval. So awareness of this is what I'm in, acceptance of this is what I'm in, and approval of the process that I'm in so I can create change. And within that context, um, giving the parents that are taking my program and working with me individually the notion of what proper parenting looks like. So I use parallel parenting as a strong model. I feel it's a do no harm model. It's an disengaged model that keeps the parents from arguing all the time, because this is the detraction that the conflict gets. And there's very little when people are divorcing that has to really be engaged in health, education, welfare of the kids, and the conflict often devolves into personal assassination, character assassination, blaming, um, that just keep it going. So the disengagement process is, what do we need to talk about here? and to do it in a fashion that it's not instantaneous. So I encourage people in the parallel parenting model not to have direct communication via phone or via text message, but to get it down into writing so it can be absorbed, analyzed, and then responded to in just what has to be responded to and not the conflictual language that is there. And also in the parallel parenting model, knowing that most of these parents have had different parenting styles within the relationship. And oftentimes those differing parenting styles were a part of the burgeoning conflict that arose out of the relationship. So we're not going to change the other person if the other person doesn't want to change. And in a high conflict situation, usually there's one person that is resistant at the very least to engaging in the change. So from this standpoint, we work with the one parent and we teach them what the engagements want to be, and specifically what the engagements don't want to be. And then to have a parenting style that is attached to nature, that is present by definition, and that gives the child a safe landing spot where they're not in the middle of the conflict. So there's this separation of, yeah, that other parent does that. That's their rules. That's what you do there. In this house, these are the rules. This is how we abide by, and these are our standards. And we teach them good boundaries. We teach them good communication skills with their children. And we teach them how to, in a connected and, I'm going to use the term joyful manner, to parent. So these kids are attracted to them. The kids want to be with them. The kids want to feel safe with them. And they're teaching them skill sets along the way. So that's the parenting section of that. And then the third piece of this is about self-care, because these parents are in stressful situations, they're ongoing. There's a constant barrage, and their nervous systems don't have an opportunity to settle. And in our last conversation, we talked about that cortisol reaction that takes 72 hours for a reset. And when there's no reset, there's disease, and the children don't have a mirror in front of them of what it looks like to be present and calm and effectively creating solutions rather than being caught in the problem all the time.
Yeah, you're talking about, part of this is this parallel parenting. Are there situations with these high conflict parents where you recommend cooperative parenting instead of parallel parenting?
Well, here's my thought, and I'm really open to the conversation with you, Dr. Gordon, but I look at parallel parenting through the lens of it's a do no harm model.
Right.
We want to create boundaries. We want to create distance. And when people typically separate and there's conflict, there's this notion that about 30% of the people that go through the divorce process are going to land in high conflict arena. That means that 70%, the vast majority of people, are going to be able to co-parent. They're going to be able to work this out and figure these pieces through. So for them, I think boundary is still important, but there can be a little more conversation about it. But parental autonomy, scheduling, having specifics of when we're going to do and what we're going to do, and not bending from those very much in the beginning, creates a stable environment for the kids, so they know where they're going to go, they know who they're going to be with, they know what the rule sets are, they know what the parameters are in their world. And over time, these parents can, if there is some initial conflict, have a tendency to lean back into cooperative parenting because they're finding that it's important for the kids. They're finding that they can cooperate. They've left some of the anger at the door. They've processed their grief of the separation, and now they're ready to be in the game. So that cooperative parenting conversation starts to evolve organically through the parallel parenting model. The notion of this 30% ish of people that are going to be in high conflict often, as you know, have some level of an attachment disorder or a pathology, a personality pathology that is in there. We would talk about it as being a cluster B axis to personality disorder or some variation of those behaviors. And when those are in place, trying to co-parent is next to impossible because of the constant criticism, the constant oppositional behavior, the struggling for control that keeps the kids entracted in the middle of this. So parallel parenting, to me, is a subset of co-parenting. There's co-parenting that has to take place within it, but it's limited in nature as to how the communication takes place and how the argument is settled by not engaging in the argument. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I like the way you say that the cooperative parenting will evolve out of a parallel parenting when they have some success at getting at problem solving with each other and keeping the emotion out of it. Then it's more likely that they can get to the point of being more engaged with each other and experience the benefits of cooperative parenting. So I imagine after people have taken your course, they're more likely to be able to move to cooperative parenting after a period of time.
Perhaps, but a lot of the people that take my course they've identified themselves in this high conflict arena, and they've got oftentimes, even if it's court ordered, people that just won't show up because they don't want to show up, that they don't want to change, they don't want to have the conflict stop. And this program is designed specifically to work when only one parent takes the program. So the cooperative parenting that might evolve out of it is when one parent learns how to drop the rope about things that are not important and focuses on the important things, and things can then begin to calm down. But typically, for the people that arrive at my doorstep, if you will, it's a unilateral decision. It's their wanting to facilitate change where the other parent is either non-compliant with the court order or just, I know everything. I don't need somebody else to tell me what to do. I'm a good parent. Don't tell me I'm not going to. You can't make me. Kind of a conversation. So it is, again, it's designed that if only one parent gets these concepts, that it can change the tenor of the conflict.
What are the different methods you use to help parents understand the impact of their conflict on the child?
I've got a couple of skits that I use in my program that when I had the program live in my offices, I would have the parents pair up, and one person would play the child and the other two people would play the warring parents, and they would all rotate so they could get a visceral sense of what it's like for these children to be caught in the middle of these arguments, but also to statistically set forth to them the notion of what happens for these children in these families where both parents aren't involved, where they are stuck in loyalty binds, where the enmeshment and the alienation and the coercive control are taking place, and how these are the children that end up incarcerated. These are the children that end up in multiple divorces in their adult lives. These are the children that end up with psychological disorders and mood disorders along the way. And when we can show them those statistics and another way to parent that brings the best out of their relationship with their child, we're creating, at least on one side of the boundary fence, if you will, a stable environment where the kids can actually start to have a sense of what secure attachment looks like. Because without that, the anxiety that comes along with relationships for them is a generational dysfunction.
I like the way you focus on teaching some parenting skills, because the research says that if the child has a good relationship with one of the two parents, who has good parenting skills,
Mhm.
that helps them get through parental conflict and another parent not being so good if they have a real good relationship with one parent. And it sounds like you're fostering that, and hopefully both parents are improving their parenting skills. Yeah, a lot of things that you teach in your course, like learning, avoiding a mental hijack, being more present, being more intentional, all of that is going to help their relationship with their children.
Part of what I try to do with these exercises and the classes and then the clients that I work with is to bring in the somatic awareness. Because you ask about what does this do to the child when they're in a conflict. Well, we can have a conversation with a parent and we can impose a situation with them of what it might look like for a child, have them actually be able to embody that and feel what the conflict is. One of the concepts that I have is this notion of how nervous systems are connected, how parent and child co-regulate with one another. And when a child is distressed and they're throwing a tantrum, or a child is distressed and they're angry about something, a parent has a visceral response to that. And my notion is two parts. One, that visceral sense is the exact visceral sense that that child is sensing. It's dysregulated and it's confused and it has a visceral sense. And if a parent can feel that and project that back as to this is what the child is feeling, then they've got a template of, yeah, this is what I am causing, or this is what this conflict is causing for this child, or this is the stress that this child is in at the moment. And it gives them a reference point to be able to engage in the conversation with the child. So this feels to me like you are experiencing X, and it can help bring them into some attunement with them and help them problem solve with it. But in that process, if a parent is able to actually assess that and self-regulate in that conversation with that child, then the child has an opportunity to attune to where that parent is at and assimilate out of the amygdala distress that they're in, coming into the prefrontal cortex for problem solving, but also having that visceral sense of, I'm calm, I'm safe, I can build resiliency from here, and I've got somebody that's got my back.
Yeah, really valuable to help parents emotionally attune to their children. Quite often, children, especially young children, don't have the emotional literacy to express their internal world with their parents.
Right,
So for the parents to have to pick up on nonverbal cues and be attentive to that, they can't do that if they're in a state of emotional amygdala hijack.
right.
So they have to get out of that state and look carefully at their children and tune into them. And when children feel tuned into, they really feel accepted and cared for and taken seriously. So it's really good that you're able to focus on that. Let's talk a little bit about parental alienation. How do you address situations where one parent is undermining the child's relationship with the other parent? And then that's a continuum. So extreme as the child refuses to see the other parent, and mild as it the parent's not aware that they're undermining the relationship because they're doing a lot of triangulation.
Well, I look at this as something that's evolved over time. I don't think this pops out of nowhere. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. And where a parent is being alienated post separation, if you will, my notion is that alienation started long before the separation happened. There were designs in the parenting relationship where one parent may have abdicated responsibility of connection with the kids, where one parent was more involved with the kids, either by agreement or just by not understanding parenting. And there is a preference that a child may begin to express, which could be kind of normal, but where that preference is really manipulated with the child, with one parent being that this is the only place you're safe and I'm always here and the other parent isn't there, and all of this stuff. These types of conversations are either implicit or explicit in that relationship, and they start really often before the separation. So when the separation occurs, it becomes more obvious that there's a preference, that there's the potential for the alienation. And if it has been ingrained enough in that child over time, and there is a campaign that says your mom is never here, your dad is always off somewhere else, he doesn't care about you, your mom has an addiction or whatever those pieces are, and it's not safe there. That is something I think that is a build on from something that's prior. So the antidote to that is not argument. It's not correcting the child's belief system. It's showing up differently, and it's being able to take the time and have the resiliency to weather the storm of everything that's coming at you from the child and from the disinformation that's being put there. So I think children, by and large, given the opportunity and the container, which is, I think, the important piece here, is that they see things, they experience things, and when they are incongruent with the words or incongruent with their experience, that's where the change takes place. But to put a child in the middle and force them into showing up, force them into engaging in behaviors that are being expressed and approved of from the other parent, is, I think it's contraindicated, because it only serves to drive that conflict deeper into the child's psyche. So creating a platform, a good therapeutic platform where the child and the parent can show up and they can talk about what the experiences are, and having a parent show up in a non-defensive manner, in a listening manner, in an understanding manner, in a place where they're not trying to defend their own narratives, but being able to let this child know that this is safe and this is a place. And if I did screw up, to acknowledge it and to come in and begin to lay a foundation for repair. But alienation, it's a deal. It's a big thing. But it's a hard, there's no one way to approach it, I don't think.
Right. It's been a big issue for the last 6 or 7 years at AFCC conferences. So there's some of the most difficult cases for divorce professionals to deal with. It drives them crazy. And a lot of times the professionals get sucked into it and will believe one parent and basically start siding with one parent against the other. And that's not uncommon.
And there's very few people out there that take a family systems approach to this, which I think is the direction that needs to happen with it. And when you've got one parent that refuses to engage in that process, it becomes way more difficult. And I don't think the judiciary has a template, a way of making somebody show up. And these are litigated for years to the demise of the child's psyche.
There's a professor at Colorado State, Professor Harmon, talks about parental alienation, and she says in cases where there is no evidence that the other parent's actually dangerous to the child, and one parent continues to alienate and turn the child against the other, that she thinks the judge should change custody and look at that. This is child abuse. You don't want to leave the child in the custody of an abuser, but that's not often the way the judiciary looks at it.
Right. And the interesting piece, I think, to that, Dr. Gordon, is the child is sitting in the middle of something that they have absolutely no way to understand or process. And if enmeshment has been really established in a relationship and you pull that child away from that, what corrective measures are you doing that's not traumatizing that child further from that separation? It's really a delicate balance to me.
It really is. Did your program at all address the concept of forgiveness and what role that could play?
Absolutely. So the forgiveness piece, I think, to me, comes out of a understanding that none of us got to where we're at by not making choices. And our choices to go through this process with this person in this life leads us to self-discovery and how to do things differently, and that each of us are on a different path in that process. And I think really, and I talk about this early in the program, that family of origin stuff, belief systems, and psychological development comes out of family of origin. And why somebody shows up the way they show up is a process of that. And I believe that we're all just trying to figure this out, whatever stage of life, whatever matter of awareness we're in at the moment. And to focus on yourself and go, listen, I've made mistakes, and start that process with self-forgiveness and working toward change, working towards doing things differently in a more healthy manner, but also looking at the other parent going, hey, they can't do it any different than they're doing. And they're miserable in their own sense there. So this isn't personal. And to get people to that place where this isn't personal, that the attacks coming at them, although they seem personal, are not. They're somebody else's survival strategy trying to control an environment that they can't control, and to let go of the notion that this is about anything more than that, and take them into, yeah, they're just doing the best that they can. And I don't, and the forgiveness piece, I think, is a part of the letting go, that place of, when I talk about awareness, acceptance, approval, that approval piece is, we're all on a journey.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
how do I optimize mine, and how do I optimize that of my child?
Yeah, I like the emphasis on how did the other parent get there? They're just trying to survive. Quite often, the other parent will take it personally instead of understanding how they got there. And I think politically, for me, it helps if I understand how a person got to be the political position that's extremely opposite of mine, how they
Mhm.
got there. Then it's easier for me to stop the judgment, withhold the judgment. They're operating on the basis of what they've learned, just like I am.
And some people don't want to go beyond what somebody told them. They don't want to go into the seeking or the exploration of that. And I think conflict um, begins to transform and become less conflictual when somebody's willing to go on that journey, to explore other mindsets and to understand why somebody thinks the way that they think, and that, there's more than one road that leads to Rome.
How do you handle cases where one parent's dealing with serious substance abuse issues?
Wow, that's a fun one, isn't it? First of all, there's got to be evidence of it, and oftentimes there's not.
Hmm.
And when we get into when we get into addiction, just in by itself, addicts are pretty good at disguising their stuff, right?
Right.
And people that are in high conflict divorces become even much better at disguising their behaviors. So part of it is um, we're going to watch a slow motion train wreck, and your kids are on that train, and there's things that you can control and you can't control. But we have to, I think a parent, even if they know that there's alcohol involved, if they know that the parent is involved in illicit drugs or whatever the addiction is that um, depending on the child's age, that they understand how to navigate their own safety in those arenas. But ultimately, these people have a tendency to shoot themselves in the foot. And when they do, to put into places where there is supervised visitation, where there is drug testing, where there is interventions like 12-step programs or some of the others that are out there, and to get those into the parenting plan, but also to be able to educate them again on this notion of disengagement, of calling somebody else out on it, is argumentative. It's a opening for the conflict to do. So putting the things in place as early as you can, with evidence-based exhibits that somebody can make a decision on to regulate the addiction and the impact on the kids. But also in that process to have these parents know that they can't be hypocritical about it. They can't say, well, um, your mom's got a drinking problem while you're walking around smoking a blunt and drinking a beer. So in other words, model safety, model that other side of that conversation.
Setting a better example. Same thing with, screen time, complaining about how this other person's on their screens all the time while you're on your phone on your screen. So you're setting a poor example. You're criticizing the child for that, and then the parents on their phone. There's a program called SoberLink,
Yes.
where it provides parents with monitoring. They can monitor their blood
Mhm.
alcohol level. They can prove that they are not drinking daily,
Yeah.
and that increases the trust that the other parent will have. So they're able to show by voluntarily subjecting themselves to daily testing that they're sober.
And having that monitoring piece is important. But one of the other things with addiction that I see come up frequently is that of prescription drugs, Adderall, et cetera, that are in there, Xanax, other drugs that are prescribed that don't show up on a panel. And one of the things that I've started to do is, because the reason they don't show up on the panel is because they are not a part of the panel, because they are prescribed. And what I like to do these days is say, okay, yeah, there's prescription drugs here, and how are they showing up in the blood work? Are they above what you would expect with that dosage? And to bring that into the conversation as well.
Parents have to, be accountable for what it is they're doing and educate themselves about what's the effect on your functioning by using this drug, whether it's, pot or alcohol or Adderall. A lot of people are in denial about the negative impact of that because they don't want to give up that substance that they're either like a lot or addicted to.
Right.
So getting them to the point where they're willing to look at themselves is really important. And it's really difficult when the other parent's constantly criticizing them and they're just always in the amygdala hijack stage where they're defensive and counterattacking. The last question I had for you is, how can parents find your course and where can they go to learn more about it?
So we've got a couple of websites. The main website is highconflict.net, and that has entries to our podcasts, our programs, both our live classes, which I teach probably 3 times a year. And then we've also got a online program that is video in nature, and it has exercises and lecture and things that they've got to go through that directly mirrors our live courses. It just doesn't have the interaction with me particularly there. And we've got a membership site. I think that you can find our membership site at disengage at highconflict.net or disengage.highconflict.net. And then we've been doing these podcasts for going on 6 years now. We've got probably 315 or 16 in the can that people can reach out and get a lot of the good information. You know, I've had interviewed you and other really established authorities in this arena. So there's places for people to get really good information from there as well. And that podcast is the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast.
I guess the most intensive option is your live class, and then you also have one-on-one with parents.
Yeah, and twice a year I do, for a very small limited group of people, I keep it to 5 or less. I will do a coaching intensive over the course of a weekend where we come in and just really dig into what's going on and creating strategies and mindsets for people to do things differently.
How do you select the small group of parents for that course?
I take in applications and I have interviews and I talk with them, and I will parse out who I think will benefit from it. And many of them that end up doing that are people that have worked with me before.
Thank you very much, Brooke, for being with us today and giving our listeners this really helpful information. Those who have used our high conflict course will see a lot of similarities, but some important differences and some different ways of looking at things will be helpful to parents about understanding themselves and understanding what they can do and what they need to do to co-parent successfully with their children. I appreciate your being here, and I look forward to having more contact with you in the future and maybe sending some parents your way.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Gordon.
Brooke, thank you so much for sharing your experience and insight with us today. And Don, as always, thank you for leading such a thoughtful conversation. For listeners who want to learn more about Brooke's work or explore the High Conflict Diversion Program, visit highconflict.net. If you found today's episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. And thanks again for joining us on Co-Parenting Conversations. We'll see you next time.